salt stung the air like memory, and Mara Reyes inhaled it as though it might stitch the planet back together. The research vessel Thales, a stubborn steel sliver in the Dawn Trench, wallowed southwest of the Marquesas, engines chugging against a violet horizon. From the bow, Mara watched the sea's colour shift ashen, almost pewter, as the first stars bled out of the sky. A lifetime of marine biology had taught her the ocean's palette: turquoises of healthy reefs, bottle greens of open gyres, iron greys of storms. Yet this colour dull, deflated, dead, was new. It was the reason the International Oceanic Council had funded her voyage, and it was why every night before sleep she whispered the old phrase she once thought poetic superstition. Sapphire Siren, sing us blue. The myth was older than the astrolabe. Mariners claimed a being lived at the lip of night and morning, a woman, or perhaps a shimmering school of them, whose voice emerged with the sun. She sang the sea awake, brushing every wave with liquid cobalt. Her song lasted from the first rim of daylight until precisely noon, when it faded the way surf retreats from sand. Afterward, the waters were left to whatever hue earthly chemistry assigned. In most centuries, that transition was imperceptible, a lovely parable about dawn's impermanence. But in the last 3 years, satellites had begun reporting a measurable change. The tropical Pacific remained grey except during those 6 radiant hours, as if myth had become the only pigment strong enough to overcome human ruin. Captain Idris Watanabe leaned against the rail beside Mara, a wool cap pulled low despite the equatorial heat. "You've got that look again," he said, voice rasping like deck rope. "The one that wonders whether old stories lie." "They never lie," Mara answered. "They just translate." Idris chuckled, revealing teeth as weathered as driftwood. "And what do they translate?" "Our need," she said, "for awe, for accountability, for blue." He tapped the binoculars strapped to his chest. "Then let's hope the Lady of Legend feels talkative come sunrise. Instruments show pH continuing to drop. Plankton counts are tragic. If we don't find your siren soon, there'll be nothing left for her to paint." The first night passed in monotonous sampling. Mara's assistants, 2 grad students named Koa and Samira, lowered Niskin bottles, pipetted water into vials, and logged numbers that told a grim fairy tale. Dissolved oxygen at record lows, microplastics eclipsing krill web. Yet Mara kept stealing glances toward the eastern seam of the world, where a thin apricot glow promised at least the possibility of sapphire. At 4:58 a.m., seconds before astronomical dawn, something like a bell tolled underwater. The sound travelled through hull plates, through bone, through every sorrow Mara hadn't known she carried. She staggered to the rail. Over the horizon, the sun's corona spilled, and with it a single high note, unfurled, pure, glassy, heartbreakingly hopeful. The ocean caught the tone and blossomed into blue so saturated it seemed obscene against the prior grey. Gasps erupted across the deck. Samira's gloved hand clutched Koa's sleeve. Idris lowered his binoculars without noticing they still dangled from his neck. All of them, for 3 full minutes, forgot the world's failures. Then the note resolved into silence, and only the colour remained. An impossible, living blue that filled every trough and crest, sky-lacquered, some would later say, siren-stained. Mara dashed for her hydrophone array. She thrust a cable overboard, foam-flecked fingers working the reel. Data scrolled across a monitor, frequencies oscillating at patterns no known cetacean could match. The amplitude mirrored the rising sun, peaking exactly as the light touched the mainmast. It was music, but also mathematics. Iteration upon iteration of perfect fifths and golden ratios, as if a throat of water itself had learned algorithm. By noon, the brilliance weakened, though not gradually. It dimmed like lamps extinguished by a master switch. A flock of terns circled, confused, then hurried toward distant reefs whose colors remained true only in their memory. The ocean's slate pallor returned, and with it the weight Mara always felt after a good dream dissolves. Witness and proof in the same dawn, Idris muttered, scribbling latitude and time into a ragged logbook. Tell me, scientist, how do we trap a miracle? We don't, Mara said, eyes still on the flat horizon. We caught it. The following days became ritual. At 5:00 the bell tone arrived. Cameras whirred, spectrometers flashed, dice cups of seawater scurried to portable labs. At 12:00 the hush fell, and grey annihilated blue with bureaucratic efficiency. Between those bookmarks, Mara worked like a soul-possessed vision. She mapped chromatic gradients, correlated them with microseismic murmurs, compared ancient sailor charts that spoke in inked curls of morning seas bright as heaven. Yet the closer she pressed her ear to the myth, the more it evaded taxonomy. On the 8th dawn, unable to endure passive observation, she suited up to dive. Oceanographers rarely entered water outside controlled studies, but longing outvoted protocol. Idris watched her gear check with paternal disapproval softened by his own curiosity. "Tether stays on," he ordered. "Depth alert at 30 meters. If the song's strong enough to scramble your head, I yank you up." "Understood," Mara said, though she doubted any rope could outmuscle what called her. She plunged into the bruise-colored pre-dawn. At 15 meters visibility was anemic, plankton blooms clouding her mask. Then the note unfurled. It vibrated through the mask's tempered glass, igniting every scatter of particulate around her like constellations. Blue raced outward, a time-lapse of creation. Mara spun, searching. And there, half a body length beyond her fins, hovered a figure. Not woman, not fish, but articulation of both. Skin laid with scales as translucent as tears, hair curling in ribbons the hue of glacier melt. Around her, the water refracted into spires of luminescence, as though obeying choreography. The figure opened her mouth again. Chords bubbled, braided, became symphony. Each filament of sound kissed a different molecule of seawater, flipping its polarity, bending sunlight toward vermilion wavelengths that scattered, then recombined as azure. Mara's instruments later confirmed the impossible physics. Light traveling in reverse bloom, red shifting directly into blue. But technology could not record the emotion in that voice. A cathedral of years, of tides, of children never born because reefs had bleached. Mara's lungs forgot to ask for air. The world was only music and colour and the dawning confession that myth might be truer than any data set. When the siren noticed Mara, the song modulated, welcoming yet wary. Mara extended a gloved hand. The figure's fingers brushed hers, cooler than the surrounding water, like liquid moon. In that touch, a sentence formed in Mara's mind, not in English but in impressions. "You are late." A coil of guilt tightened inside Mara. If humanity had arrived earlier, banished plastic, hushed engines, would the siren's job have felt less futile? She tried to respond, but bubbles fled her mouth uselessly. The siren tilted her head, expression mournful and resigned, then released Mara's hand. Noon struck, unmarked by clocks but by the cessation of song. The blue peeled away like sheared scales. The figure dissolved with it, atom by atom, until no trace remained except a single sapphire note that lingered in Mara's ears like tinnitus born of paradise. Back on deck, she failed to speak for an hour. Samira brewed coffee thick as molasses and forced the mug into her palms. Idris didn't ask questions. He had already seen the wet salt tracks on her cheeks and knew they weren't seawater. At night, Mara scoured Talis's modest library, unearthing papyrus reproductions, monastery marginalia, Polynesian chant lyrics. Across cultures, two constants recurred: the siren's dawn duty and her silence at noon. Yet one variant, a fragment of Chukchi whaling lore, mentioned a third phase, an evening lament. sung only when the ocean was no longer worthy of its morning gift. That lament, the scroll warned, summoned storms that swallowed ships whole. 3 days later, barometers plummeted. Wind carved shrieks from the rigging. Waves slapped the hull like giant oars gone mad. At 21:17, the rain intensified to needles, scattering crew across the deck in frantic lunges to secure equipment. Lightning crowned itself on black anvils of cloud. Mara fought ropes with hands rubbed raw. She couldn't hear any song, only wind, but something in that chaos felt orchestrated minorchy, dissonant. Aching, a boom shuddered beneath them. Corroded weld gave way. Seawater surged into the stern lab. Idris yelled for pumps, for prayers, for ballast adjust. Amid the pandemonium, Mara pressed her palms against the flooding bulkhead, and through steel she detected the faintest hum. Not the hopeful aria of dawn, but a dirge so sorrowful it felt like being rocked to sleep by grief. The lament, she whispered. The siren was not punishing them. She was mourning the sea she could no longer heal. If the lament grew full-throated, the storm might escalate beyond survival. Mara raced to the bridge. "Lower me," she demanded, "now, before this becomes a maelstrom." Idris cursed, but comprehension flickered behind his eyes. He strapped her into a harness tethered to the submersible bay hoist. Lightning stitched the sky. The descent felt like offering herself to Jaws. Yet terror was distant compared to the urgency pulsing in her bloodstream. 20 meters down, the water was black-green, churned by storm. Her headlamp carved a tunnel through silt, and then the siren. Ragged this time, hair tangled with drifting plastic shreds, body flickering between solid and spectral. Around her the water glowed not blue but a wounded indigo, bruised by each sob of song. Mara unclipped the light. She wanted no barrier. She swam closer, heart piston-like. She thought a single declarative intention. "We will change. Please believe." The siren's eyes, opal-dappled, fathomless, locked onto hers. The lament faltered. Silence flooded the water, a silence louder than any storm. Into that hush Mara poured images. Beaches without litter, fisheries restored, children knee-deep in tide pools bright as sapphires. Not prophecy but promise. Minutes passed, or centuries in compressed form. Finally, a single note slipped from the siren's throat, soft, uncertain, major, not minor. The storms above slackened, swells gentled. Mara's lungs ached. She rose, hauled by the harness and Idris's brute winch. When she breached the surface, the sky remained starless, yet the rain had thinned to a confession instead of an indictment. Thales survived the night. Generators hummed back to life. Coffee pots percolated. Sailors treat miracles cautiously. They created labor to keep their tongues still. Mara retreated to her cabin, keyed open a voice log at 3:44. She described everything, from the dawn blues to the storm's hinge upon lament. Her words sounded fragile, like glass birds that might shatter under the weight of skeptical ears. But she spoke them anyway, because silence, the noon hush, was the siren's realm, not hers. At sunrise the song returned, but softer, as though testing whether the world had earned it. The water blued, yes, but patches of grey stubbornly lingered where oil slicks roamed. Mara took this as measurement, conditional grace. She spent the next week transmitting data, not to the Council alone, but to every university, citizen science network, and coastal radio frequency she could hack. She paired spreadsheets with story, regression analyses with reverence. Some colleagues replied with tentative fascination. Others dismissed her as romantic. The world, busy with wars and dividends, mostly shrugged. On the 14th dawn, as the siren's note gilded the deck rails with dew, Mara made a choice. She asked Idris to set course for Tahiti, the nearest harbour with a functioning press corps. He eyed her a long while, then nodded. "Stories travel faster on land," he said, "even the ones made of water." They docked in Papeete amidst cruise ships and coral-scouring tugboats. Journalists came drawn by rumour, repelled by improbability, yet compelled by the impossible photographs Mara's team had captured. A woman-shaped silhouette sculpting light. Spectrograms resembling stained-glass windows. An ocean turning from grey to lapis within 3 camera frames. Still, humans believe what matches their hunger. The ratings loved apocalypse, not myth. The headlines pivoted toward toxins, dead zones, easily monetized despair. Frustrated but unbroken, Mara sought elders whose tongues carried older grammar than prophet. She found a storyteller named Ahiata, bones thin as coral branches, eyes bright as lagoon shallows. Mara recited everything. Ahiata listened without blinking, then smiled. "Our people have always known her," the woman said. "Her name is Vaihura. She is not punishment or prize. She is measurement." "Measurement of what?" Mara asked. "Of our covenant with beginnings. Each dawn she offers us a chance to start again. If we fail, she grows faint and the world drifts toward unmaking." Atia taught Mara a chant, older than charts, 6 lines that promised alignment, sung by fishing crews before netting only what they could eat. Mara recorded it, then taught it to anyone willing. Schoolchildren, activists, dock workers, cleaning hulls. Whether they believed didn't matter. The chant rewired posture, bent backs toward humility. Word seeped across archipelagos. In Fiji, a youth senate cited the Sapphire Siren during debates over marine reserves. In Chile, divers organized dawn vigils, cleaning harbors before the song faded. None of it was fast enough for ticking carbon clocks, but currents shifted micro, but real. Back aboard Thalos, months later, Mara returned to the coordinates where her first descent had brushed myth. The crew had changed. Some skeptical replacements, some fervent disciples. But the horizon remained that delicate edge between possibility and regret. At 4:59, the bell tone welled. The blue spread wider than before, lingering seconds longer past noon. Not victory, merely inching reprieve. Yet those seconds felt like inheritance. Mara stood at the bow, eyes pricking with wind. She imagined the siren below, voice carving hymn from salt, trusting the fragile mammal above to carry the tune inland. She raised her own voice, not as sweet, not as vast, but stitched with purpose. One by one, sailors joined, their harmony ragged but valiant. The ocean listened. Beside the ship, a dolphin leapt through the bluing water, etching an arc of living affirmation against the sky. And for a heartbeat longer than yesterday, the song stayed